So, last episode, we focused on how using free thinking and spiritual insights help us navigate the current cultural climate. Whether you're focused on personal issues or socio-political or political ones, these principles can be powerful guides, and they're essential to our self love walk as well as to living with clarity. So, as last week's episode closed, I promised to spill the tea on a little story time about being in the wrong place at the wrong time. In this case, lack of clarity delivered some dangerous outcomes. What I'd like to drill deeper into here is how our motives shape the ways we and others see things. And if we don't check our motives, we might find ourselves on the wrong side of a situation. Ever find yourself on the wrong side of a situation and wonder, how the heck did I end up here? Of course you did. We all do. I'm grateful to share some of my own experiences with this topic, and I hope you walk away inspired by how powerful free thinking and spiritual clarity are in crisis moments. In today's episode, you'll get a little 411 on how perspective and clarity are vital to our survival. You'll hear about my own experience with what a warped perspective can cost you in vulnerable moments, and you'll gain insights and tactical ways to stay emotionally and spiritually grounded in free thinking.
Do you crave better self-esteem and confidence, but struggle to silence your worry, fear, and insecurity? If you're ready to step into a life you love, you're in the right place. Hi, I'm Jennifer DeBellis, award-winning author and speaker. I help women like you overcome fear and doubt to reclaim their self-worth and confidence. I can't wait to share the secrets I've learned on my own healing journey. Are you ready to restore your inner warrior? Then turn off those distractions and tune into this next episode.
So I want to open up today's session with a little bit of key term establishment here. So I want to talk about 3 terms that I'm going to use, and I want to give you like a little foundation on them. Okay, so the first term I want to talk about is clarity. Clarity is like a camera lens before you add any filters or attachments to it to alter what can be seen through this line of view. The problem is, many of us go through our lives viewing life through the filters we or outside influences have placed over our original lens. In other words, our eyesight. The second word I want to talk about is perspective. While our eyes see and perceive our literal world, perspective is a filter lens that tells us what we're seeing and how to process and accept these things. So this is a major contributor to why we lack clarity on certain things. And then the third word is motive. A motive is an intention for an expected outcome. It's the why behind doing something. It's the purpose, the reason, the intention at work. So motive is an important goal-setting element that I want to talk about here because I talk about it a lot with my one-on-one coaching clients. I talk about it a lot with my students. And it's a very important element at work when you think about setting goals and working toward achieving them. So on a very basic level, a goal is just an expected or anticipated outcome. When we come back to the motive behind that, that's that driving force that propels forward motion to reach those expected outcomes. So if you're goal setting without a motive, there's really nothing to work toward or no destination in mind. So this is something that I do explore when I work with people about identifying their goals and setting up action plans on how to work toward those. And I also talk about and break down how this lack of clarity really clouds our view and keeps us walking around in a fog, and we have no idea what we're trying to achieve and why we're trying to achieve it. So we're just kind of aimlessly walking around. So you can see how all of these things have to work together for our good. And if we aren't intentional about establishing this clarity and protecting our perspective and doing the work to get a good perspective and maintain a good perspective and checking our motives and also scrutinizing and checking the motives of other people we're interacting with, then this can lead us to really dangerous territory. Motives have a way of becoming the ultimate goal itself. So this is where I come into a story that I want to share with you. So a few years ago, my husband had a situation that really opened our eyes to a lot of different things. He was assaulted and ended up being the one who got arrested. And so just wrap your head around that as well. I'll try to give you the briefest breakdown of the main plot points here so that you can follow along. I don't want to spend the whole episode just talking about the play-by-play. It's kind of, I don't want to say traumatizing for me, but to live it over and over and over again is very frustrating and draining, and that's not the point that I want to get at here, although I will share the important details so that you can kind of empathize with some of the things that were going wrong and at play, but that also we're going to connect to some of these key terms that I just introduced to you. So the actual incident itself, long story short, my husband tries to go do something that he's trying to do something nice. He's trying to donate something, and it turns into this altercation where an individual, the person who owned the shop where he was trying to donate this, her husband, who was drunk at the time, who is known as being an alcoholic and really struggling with his drunken disorderliness, was not happy with it, and this altercation breaks out. He grabs the item that my husband's, which is a box TV. So it was like this unique situation. We had this old box tube TV, and he's like, oh, she already said, yeah, I'd probably be interested in it. So it was perfectly good working order, but we don't use those anymore. We have flat screen TVs. So he brings it in. This guy does not want it, so he's going to give it back. He just take it back. But my husband is walking with a cane on this particular day because he has gout and it's flared up really, really bad. So he's hobbling around on his feet. And he's like, if you want me to take it back, you can bring it back to the van. So he's bringing it back. And the guy's like a little chihuahua, like, yelling stuff at him the whole time. And my husband's thinking in his head, you jerk, I'm taking it back. Like, you don't get to talk to me this way. And so he gets over to his van, he opens up the doors, and he turns to the guy who's still just going on and on and on. And he finally is like, why are you being such a jerk about this? I'm taking it back. And he didn't say jerk, he used a swear word. And the guy just lost it, saw red. So clearly he must be called these types of names when he's acting this way. And this is a trigger for him. So he starts to see red and he starts to get physical with my husband. The first thing he does is he throws the TV at him and he just misses him. Like my husband's just able to get out of the way. It's a TV bus. It's, pieces are going all over the place. It rolls into the road. I mean, this is a main road in our small little town. So then the guy comes over and he is like, he's a former martial artist, so he starts to take his positions, and my husband's looking at him like, and he's a little dude too. Like my husband's this big dude, this is little dude, and my husband's like, I didn't come here to fight. Like, I'm getting too old for this stuff. This is a young man's game. I didn't come here to fight. So he's like, chill out, buddy. And the guy kicks him in the sternum. And he kind of like stumbles back. And so he does hit him one time. And then this fight ensues. And so he hits my husband in the face. And my husband's on blood thinners. So now he's bleeding. You want to talk about clarity. He can't see anymore. Eventually the guy knocks him to the ground. And he's like beating on him. And my husband's like, is that all you got? Like he just wants to go on with his day. He can't see. He's irritated. He's in pain from his feet. Now he's being assaulted. So now someone comes, breaks it up. It's this big, huge fight. I won't get into all the different details, but the guy's a real jerk throughout the whole thing. Even when his wife comes to help out, eventually another bystander who breaks up the fight brings him back into the store. And you can hear him shoving things around. I'm not sure if it's his wife or what it is, but she's trying to hold him back from coming back out. The cops finally come. And this is where things get really interesting because my husband is like, oh, great. Like, help is here. That's what the police are supposed to do. They're supposed to come to a situation and help. And instead of helping the situation, right off the bat, it gets on the wrong note. Things get started. And I know all this because I've reviewed over 100 times the body cam footage and some of the dashboard cam footage in this incident when I was trying to prepare things for the legal battle that was ahead of us. I'm getting ahead of things, I know. So now he comes and he already in his head has a motive. This comes out eventually, but he already has a foggy perspective and foggy clarity on the situation. And no matter what he does to try to do his job, to try to collect the information, everything is tarnished by this perspective and by some of the motives that he carried into the situation. There's a lot of things that go wrong from the line of questioning, the way of questioning, not sequestering the other witnesses when you're asking one witness, and this is all caught on camera. So
I just want to hop in here for a moment and mention that I'm now accepting one-on-one coaching clients. So if you're ready to get clarity and big picture vision on your goals, consider booking a session with me today. Find a link to book your session in the show notes below.
He's taking all of the information from everybody except for my husband. So he doesn't take a statement from my husband. And my husband was like, that's weird. He just arrests him. He's like, okay, I've got everything I need. And my husband is like baffled by this. He's like, are you kidding me? You're not even going to give me a chance to tell you what happened. This guy threw a TV at me. He kicked me and all these things. Nope, you started the fight. And so it came down to he said, she said. And in my husband's mind, he's like, this absolutely didn't happen. He gets loaded into the car. They start to pull away. And my husband, right away, is like, hey, is that a camera? Because he notices his camera on his dashboard facing the back seat. And he's like, yeah. And he's like, have you been recording this the whole time? And he goes, yeah, and I have a body cam on too and a dash cam. My husband goes, oh, good. He goes, the shop owner also has 8 cameras on the facility. And you're going to feel really stupid when you get to see the video and you realize you're arresting the wrong person. So he's like, oh, really? So now they get to the jail. He has not been given his Miranda rights, not read them at all, which apparently now that's not even a requirement, but he was never read his rights. He was not then given his rights from the moment he was processed through intake at the actual jail. The only reason I knew he was arrested was because the ambulance, the EMT called me when my husband was trying to tell them what kind of medications he was on. He's like, I don't know all the medications I'm on, but my wife does. So he gets me on the phone, he hands him the phone. This is when they're just trying to get the bleeding to stop on his nose before he's arrested, which is kind of another reason why they're tending to him while the officer is interviewing other people on the scene. And so my husband is thinking, oh, once the ambulance gets me stable here, whatever, then I'm going to get to talk to the officer and give him my side of the story, which never happens. And even once he was at the jail and he's going through the intake, he's still not being treated fairly. He's not being treated justly. So there's a perception that already exists. My husband doesn't know what the officer may have said before he brings him in, but there's a clear thing that is happening that my husband is starting to sense, like they're treating me different. And maybe it's just because he was bringing him in on felonious assault charges, but he's like, something's weird here. And something in our small town is for years, they assumed that my husband was biracial. So they assumed that he was biracial, and a few times that was kind of used against him where people treated him with prejudice, and we just kind of laugh about it because let him wonder about things, and we never really thought like it was going to come and bite him in the butt. But so he's getting this treatment where all the way through the process, for several days they held him in the jail without allowing him to go to his digital arraignment, because this is like right after COVID. He didn't get to go to his arraignment, and, he had other health conditions. So he's like, look, I really want to get checked out by the hospital. And that ends up happening too. And the officers are in charge of his whole medical treatment. So when they decided, oh, he's not having a heart attack, okay, release him, I want to take him back, the officer had the last say. My husband had no say. I had no say. I did end up finding out. It was really funny. Now I can kind of laugh about it because I kept finding things out, even though people were trying to skew what I was able to see. So they were trying to mess with my clarity so that I couldn't help him the right way. When I went to try to advocate for him outside, I'm like, hey, I want to get him an attorney. How can I get him in touch with an attorney of my choice? When can I meet with him? He hasn't had a chance to have a phone call or a visitation. And I was turned down over and over and over again. And I was like, this is crazy. The only reason why I know he's here is because I just so happened to get a phone call from the EMT. Otherwise, he would be a missing person. I wouldn't even know he's here to be advocating for him. And they never did let him have his own attorney. They never did let him have visitation. They never did let him make a phone call. None of it. They were like, we don't have to do that. You have to wait for your arraignment. And it was just really, it was bizarro. And I've had other experiences that I've been exposed to that are very similar, because once you go through something like that and you tell your story, all of a sudden people are like, oh my God, something similar happened to me. And I got to co-author a book that was on a much larger scale. And it was very helpful in that project for me to say, oh my gosh, I can totally relate to this. And this stuff actually does happen. So I learned about some of these things through my own investigative work trying to prepare now for the legal battle ahead of us. But there was some really interesting things that I wasn't able to learn, and I was able to learn through the disclosure items that I did get, which was a very heavily tampered with video. So there were a lot of things censored out. And one of the things I should mention is the officer actually went back to the scene afterwards and tipped them off about the cameras, so they destroyed the footage. So now it really was their word against my husband's word. And then the following day, when I went out to kind of survey the area, I noticed that the bank right next door to the building also had security cameras mounted on the building that were in direct line of sight of the incident. So our attorney subpoenaed these records and they would not release them. So they were also obstructing justice. And the interesting thing about this town, it's a small town, and all you need is one or two busybodies who run their mouth off. And wouldn't you know, the shop owner herself was a busybody. She was constantly telling people her business, trying to get sympathy for people. And so she was telling people things and it was getting back to me. So even though I couldn't get a lot of the stuff from the actual discovery, I was getting discovery through secondhand accounts of people telling me things. So I was able to bridge some of these things together by just the things that she was telling people, thinking that it wouldn't get back to us or to anybody else. And so that was a kind of cool development, but it was kind of disheartening and alarming to go through the experience and to see how much tampering from the prosecutor's office and from our local law enforcement office to make it impossible for us to get all of the things that existed, for us to be able to get full clarity and have the same perspective. But they couldn't censor everything out. So there were little tiny pieces that were left in the footage that maybe they didn't even realize that they needed to censor out too. There's that possibility. Of course, I'm left speculating, trying to, again, get a better perspective of it and get full clarity on the situation. What I did notice through watching the footage and trying to make sense of a lot of things that were completely baffling, like why is he doing it that way? Why is he asking questions this way? Why is he not asking that? Why is he not doing this? And then some of the things that he was saying, he was even leading the witness. So he wasn't asking even questions at some point. He was just making statements and going, right. And we get to a point toward the end of the video, once he's loaded my husband in the car, and there was another officer on the scene that came from a nearby town that was assisting this because it was after hours. And again, we're a small town, so we don't have a lot of officers on the clock at the same time. So now he's helping them, and you get him on record saying to the other cop, I finally got this guy on something. And just for clarity, like, my husband has no citations, no speeding tickets. Like, he's not like, the cops have never had to be called out to a situation. So that was really like out of pocket for anybody who didn't understand that the prior regime kind of had this long-standing animosity toward my husband, because my husband's that kind of guy who would be like, he just tells you what he thinks. And he had criticized something decades ago, and this was kind of like a vendetta that was like long standing, where these guys were like, God, we can't stand this guy. Like, so that's playing in the background there, that all of a sudden this I knew I'd eventually get you on something was this big revelation for me, because it exposed motive. So then I was like, okay, now I kind of understand. I don't agree. I kind of understand why he was doing certain things in a certain way, because he came to the scene with bias, looking through the whole thing through a specific filter. So there was a completely different lens on there. So like last week I talked about having scales on your eyes, and that's kind of in the same boat. You have these scales on your eyes, so you're looking like this, and it skews the way that you're able to see things. It's blocking certain things out, and you're perceiving things that might not be there. And so understanding this like long-term vendetta that's finally being fulfilled really kind of helped me then go back in over and over and over again, looking through all the different things, including this footage, to try to piece it all together and figure it all out. And I don't want to, this isn't an anti-police kind of a situation. This is an instance where if this officer can't take any type of conviction, that's on him. But there's no one who has eyes to see could look at this whole situation and say, there's no foul play, or there's no biases at work, or there's no folly. And so again, I'm speculating, but it's like, here's this motive that became a subconscious mechanical motion for this other individual, where it was like, you have a perception for so long, and you have that motive maybe for so long, that your bias is like, you know what, we'll get this guy, he's a derelict, or he's a whatever judgment that you have on them. And then here comes this situation, the perfect situation. My husband's in the wrong place for him, for the officer, at the right time. So now this impulse arises from this prior perspective, and then everything played out the way it played out. And again, then the greatest cover-up that ensued, now I'm like, there is no way that I can look at this situation and say there wasn't any type of foul play. There wasn't any type of, things that weren't done right on purpose. Like, I have to believe anybody with seeing eyes, including the officer in the situation, would eventually be like, let me check my biases, which is what you're supposed to do in that professional situation. And let me just try to see this for exactly what it is. And going and try to cover things up. And then the offices collaborating, colluding with each other and trying to make sure that certain things get buried, and all these different things that happened, is like, there's no way that their ulterior motives were making clarity nearly impossible for us. And so that was something that the whole way through, we ended up getting the charges dropped. But I want to say that the whole process, I used my own clarity to navigate this legal battle. So there were a lot of times in this experience where my husband was just like, can you just handle it? You're better at that stuff. I also forgot to mention, on top of some of my husband's other health issues, he was diagnosed with stage 4 throat cancer during this time. So now we're like, well, that complicates things. And he's just like in a fight for his life, which thankfully he's in remission. So he kicked cancer's butt in 8 weeks. Thank God. But in this whole thing, he's like, I'm picking my battles, and I'm in the battle of my life right now. So you work through this with the attorney and the prosecutor's office and all this stuff, and just tell me where to show up and when to show up. So he was like, I trust you. So there was a lot of times where I was like, okay, I have a big job on my shoulders here to make sure I get the right information and then bring it to him so that we can make, sound judgment calls and decisions moving forward. But one of the things that got me through it was I exercised free thinking while securing my husband's release all the way through to him getting the charges dismissed. And I remained spiritually grounded by standing on my faith and the principles that I live by. So there was a point where the prosecution, even though they were obstructing the clarity and interfering with our ability to get all of disclosure, they were still pressing for us to take a plea deal. And we're like, plea deal? Like, he's innocent. He's not taking a deal. He's not taking anything. He's not compromising. God would not say, you need to lie and say you did something you didn't do for this to all go away. So I'm like, I guess if we're playing cards, I'm going to say, I'm all in. Like, I got a better hand than you have. And so I just stood on that, and they kept doing it even toward the end, even when we were like, oh my God, this guy eventually ripped somebody else off and left town. And we're like, you don't even have your witness anymore. Like, the guy who actually assaulted my husband was no longer here because he stole hundreds of thousands of dollars from another individual in town. And he had a bounty on his head now. And so we're like, you don't have a case. They were still trying to get us to take a deal. And we're like, no, you have to dismiss it. You do not have a case. And they just wouldn't let it go. And it was just, it was so frustrating to watch that kind of play out. But the whole time I'm standing on my spiritual grounding and on my faith to be like, that's not the way that my faith works. You don't have to do that. You don't have to compromise your values. You don't have to say you did something. You don't have to go along and play nice with certain things, especially when you're being misrepresented. So we collaboratively used this free thinking and spirituality to gain clarity on the situation and then to set goals for the anticipated outcomes. So it's like very similar to some of the things that I do with my coaching students, which It's like, okay, let's do these particular things and let's do this particular thing. And then we have clarity on the goals and the outcomes that we want to happen. I use the same type of strategy everywhere in my life. And so here I am using that very simple pattern of breaking things down and organizing things to get clarity and then to have a plan and then to go after that plan. I was using that here to help us. And there is power that I watched play out in this situation, and I watch it play out in a lot of different situations, but there was power in not compromising our values under pressure. There was power in waiting things out, even though we were starting to feel anxious. There was power in seeking to understand and taking all things under advisement. So that's right, you take everything under advisement, even some of the things that didn't feel good. We even had to switch attorneys mid-case because we had an attorney who was like not giving us good advice, who was not getting us the missing disclosure and like, oh, well, that's done. Like, nobody, that's not how it works. And when I started to see like, wait, these people aren't for us. And I want to emphasize here, I'm fighting for my husband. I'm not the one on trial. It's my husband, and I care about him, and I don't want him to have not one blemish on his record from something like this. So I'm like, no, I care to see this work out, and if it means getting a whole new attorney and paying all over again, that's what we ended up doing. Now fast forward, I'm watching certain things play out in our current political climate, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm thinking about this case again. I'm thinking about my husband's experience. I'm thinking about Raj's experience in the book that I just co-authored, and I'm like, wow, these are similar to a lot of events that are going on right now in my news feeds. And watching it play out and seeing the way that people talk about it out in the open and how you just sit there and go, oh my gosh, like a seeing person could see right through this. And then you just realize like, oh my God, people believe they're seeing people and they're not seeing what's right in front of them. It's like they have scales on their eyes. They're looking through things through these different filters. And I had an instance where I was talking in a very heated discussion with somebody who I care about, which you might find yourself in these situations where you're like, dang it, I don't really want to argue about these things, or I don't want to get into heated discussions about these things, but sometimes you can't escape them because they occur with people that you care about. We had a recent incident, and I said to my husband, the weird thing that I'm seeing happen is that people are like arguing for just one side of something, when I'm like, people don't realize that there could be two things that are right at the same time. And it's like, that's where the enemy's getting us all divided, is that there are two things that are happening maybe at the same time. And one having a valid reason doesn't negate the other one that's not going a specific way. And so that's where I found myself in this heated discussion. And I really felt deflated after this conversation. I felt like the air was being squeezed out of me, because I felt like any seeing person would see specific things, and here someone is trying to get me to see it their way and only their way. You just have to see it this way. Well, things are this way because, and that's just it, period. And I was like, no, it's a little more complicated. And through this back and forth, I was like, we're not even talking about the same things. And they were like, and it was two individuals, and they were like, no, this is the culprit. This is what started everything. If this hadn't started everything, and I was like, no, you're missing the point also, because that doesn't explain what's happening over here. And many of the people involved in this are not even aware of that thing over there. And so in this discussion, I was thinking, oh my gosh, there are so many people, sometimes well-intentioned, that try to simplify complex things as being black or white. It's just one way or the other. And in the communications realm, many of these modes of thinking are considered logical fallacies. And there's two different logical fallacies that I want to talk about here and point out. There's the fallacy of single cause, and this results when there's an assumption that an event or an outcome has a single cause, when in reality there are likely various causes and factors that cannot be oversimplified to just one. So I felt that that was really playing out in this conversation, where I was like, two things can be right at the same time. There's also the false dichotomy or dilemma, where the argument implies that only one view is right or valid. And I kind of felt this was playing out too. And so this is one where it forces others to accept a narrow or very specific viewpoint. And often this viewpoint is extreme. Does this sound familiar? I feel like the polarized sides of all of the political things going on in our current events are that way, where we see a lot of these logical fallacies playing out, this black or white, this us against them kind of a thing, this very narrow viewpoint. If you have to see it, right? It's like looking through a lens that has blinders on the side, where you're like, don't worry about what's out here, just focus on what I'm trying to show you right here. And it's like, that's not how clarity works. Clarity is trying to see everything that's right here. Clarity is trying to get a real good look at the larger picture, at the full picture here. And so in this heated discussion about current affairs, I really tried to listen to understand, but my spidey senses were just on high alert the whole time. So there were so many times where what was being said and my own thoughts being dismissed as being like not valid or logical, like I just didn't feel right. And it wasn't like, oh, I feel offended. That's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about those spidey senses where you just like your hairs are crawling and you're just like, this is wrong. This feels wrong. This is wrong. That time where you say, gosh, if I just go along with this, I might find myself on the wrong side of things and then wonder, how the heck did I get here? So I was really kind of resisting that, I don't even want to say it was an urge. I didn't have an urge to get in line. I didn't have an urge to get in line. I had an urge to understand. I'm really trying to understand, because in my head, and maybe in their head too, it's like, well, any seeing person can see what's right in front of you here. But I'm like, any person who is trying to collect everything and put it before them and look at it can see, like, it's not adding up, for starters. Like, there are things missing from the narrative here. There are things that aren't adding up. Why is it that this detail's missing, or this doesn't make sense? What came before this? And so I'm like, sometimes we're left with more questions than we have answers, and that actual like better clarity of the bigger picture doesn't come in the way that we anticipate it coming and just being able to see it all. But sometimes clarity works that way as well, to where we can see and we can make sense by what's left out. We can fill in those blanks by the only logical things. It's like, this has to be here for this to have existed, so therefore we have to assume that it was here. But the more and more I listened, the more I started to feel like things were wrong. And then I finally got to a point where, I was just saying, this is far more complex than you're trying to make it out to be. And I found myself also saying, is it possible that two things could be right at the same time? And one of my friends looked at me like, I put something out there that made him pause. I said that. I finally got that moment from the one friend who was like, And then I was like, okay, this is a good place to just be like, and I'm done with this conversation. But I didn't want to be rude about it. So I was just like, and I can't talk about this anymore right now. Let's just have fun. We came here to have fun. And that was this decision that I made in self-love. Like, I just have to bring this conversation to an end right now. And that was a self-love move. And so last week I closed by giving you a little self-love homework. I hope you had a chance to meditate on the outside influences that inform your beliefs and values. And I hope that you're doing your own research and fact-checking so that you have clarity, and the type of clarity that aligns with your values and aligns with your beliefs, and that is as fully informed as possible. And it's okay to resist someone telling you exactly what you have to think, exactly what you have to see, exactly how you have to do that. You are smart enough to bring all of these things together and then to make informed judgments with that clarity. Anybody who tells you you have to accept their view of something and see it exactly the way they see it, that's like a power move. And that's like the kind of power move that shows you, or should show you, there's an insecurity at work in that other person. Because we are supposed to be free thinking. You're supposed to be able to be so confident in that free thinking that you are able to be open to other perspectives and open to receiving all of the factual information, and then to make a decision based on that. So believe in yourself and believe that you can make sound judgments, even if those judgments align with the other individuals in question or they don't. So next episode, we'll continue this clarity journey by exploring self-loathing, I know we're going to go there, and ways to reprogram our thinking to align with our intended outcomes and goals. So until then, I just hope that you operate within the power of free thinking and spiritual clarity in your crisis moments, but also just in your everyday life. That in doing this, it gives you a sense of confidence and peace, and it allows you to reclaim some of the happiness that some of these political events are kind of stealing, because they're constantly running in the background, not just of our mind, but of every single news feed and social media feed out there. So protect your peace and just keep operating with free thinking and spiritual clarity.
Well, girl, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, follow my channel and share it with friends who also want to restore their self-worth and confidence. And if you're ready to get clarity and big picture vision on your goals, consider booking a one-on-one coaching session with me. Find a link in the show notes below to book a session. And as you go through your week, may your empowered spirit, heart, and mind guide you. Catch new episodes every Saturday. Ciao.